Okay, hello everyone. Okay, so the next program in chapter 5, actually, this is the last program in chapter 5, actually. Yeah, so the last program in chapter 5 is ESP Game. Okay, so write a program that tests your ESP, extrasensory perception. The program should randomly select the name of a color from the following list of words: red, green, blue, orange, yellow. To select a word, the program can generate a random number. For example, if the number is 0, the selected word is red. So it's kind of given these words index or indices, right? So it's given this, the index or indices start from 0. So it's given this first name 0, this second name 1, and this third name an index of 2, 3, 4. Although there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements, it's starting from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's why it's saying if the number is 0, then the selected word is red. If the number is 1, the selected word is green, and so forth. Next, the program should ask the user to enter the color that the computer has selected. So after the user has entered his or her guess, the program should display the name of the randomly selected color. The program should repeat this 10 times and then display the number of times the user correctly guessed the selected color. Be sure to modularize the program into methods that perform each major task. Okay, so basically, it's like the computer is going to guess the color. The user is also going to guess the color, and we are checking to see if the color that the computer guessed and the user guessed is the same. And if it's the same, we're going to do this 10 times and count how many times the user guessed it correctly, right? It should display the number of times the user correctly guessed it, right? But we have to figure out how to generate the random numbers and generate the random names, for the computer especially, because the users are just going to type in, his or her choice. But for a computer, we're going to generate a random number, for example, in the range of 0 to 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We are going to give these colors indices, right? You can think of each of them is going to have an index starting from 0. You can name them 1. You can give them indexes from, basically you can give them any number. But we are going to we are going to give these numbers in the indexes or in the indices of starting from 0. So red is going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to generate a random number and then choose from these names. So if the random number is, let's say, 2, so 0, 1, 2, then that means the color selected was blue. And then that's how we're going to basically select the color that the computer chose. That's how we're going to basically let the computer select the color or guess a color. All right, so let's start, and it will make sense as we do it. So I'm going to go ahead and, first of all, it also mentions that we should be sure to modularize the program into methods that perform each major task. So that means we're going to go ahead and create methods for it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and create methods for it. It's just chapter 5. It's all about methods. Okay, so I'm going ahead to create a class, and then I'll call it ESP Game. And then I'll create the main method. Okay, so let's see. Write a program that tests. Okay, we know that. It says the program should randomly select the name of a color from the list. All right, so over here it says to select a word, the program can generate a random number, right? For example, if the number is 0, the selected word is red. If the number is okay. So since we are going to be generating random numbers, we have to go ahead and import the random class. But before that, now the program mentioned over here that we should be sure to modularize the program into methods that perform each major task, right? So the computer generating a random number, or basically the computer selecting a color can be in its own method. We can go ahead and create a method and call it generate computer color. So we can generate a method and call it generate computer color. And anytime we call that method is going to return the color that the computer generated. We're going to have the code in that method, but the method is going to do everything and return the color that that it shows, right? So let's go ahead and create a method called generate computer color, or generate computer color. In the chapter 5 videos, I've mentioned that some people like to define their methods below the main method, and that's fine. That works. You can go ahead and create a method under main, and you can call it in main. You can call it in main above it. It doesn't matter if the method is defined below main, and you're calling it in main. It doesn't matter. When you define a method, it's available to be called even in main. So some people do that, and I do that sometimes too. But for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and define my method above main, just because I like doing that sometimes. It's logical to me sometimes. So I'm going to define the method in main for this one. Okay, so I'm going to create a method. It's going to be a public static method. It's a public method because this method is going to be available to code outside of this class. And it's going to be a static method because this method is going to belong to this class, or this method belongs to this class. Now I need to specify or define the return type of the method, right? This method is going to basically return the color that the computer chose. So I want it to return a string, right? So when I call this, I just want you to return a string that is the choice, or the color that the computer chose. So I'm going to specify the return type as a string here. And I'm going to now give it a name. I'm going to call it generate computer color. And then I'm going to create the structure of the method. Let's see if it's going to need any parameters defined. So this method, in this method, I'm going to be generating a random number, right? But this method is a standalone. It's on its own. It will need, for it to generate random numbers, it will need a random object. Okay, it will need a random object to be able to use that to generate random numbers. So just as when you pass in, when you, for example, creating functions or creating methods, and you define parameters as let's say int number, or you can define a parameter as let's say string name. Just as you do that, you specify the type and then the name of the variable, the parameter, the placeholder. Since this method is going to require or need a random object, so it's going to I'm going to define a parameter as a random object. It's going to need a random object, okay? And this is what I'm calling the variable. I'm calling the class type variable, which is random, okay? So this is a class type, pretty much. It's a class type, and this is a class type variable, right? So so anytime someone calls this method, I would need a random object of type random. Just like when you're defining a variable and you say I need an integer, a number of type integer. Now I would need a random object of type random. This is just a name referencing the random object that the user is going to type. When the user types gives me the random object, it's going to replace this name, but it has to be of type random because it has to be a random object. Okay, so once the user gives me the random object, I'm going to use the random object to generate a random number. So what I want to do is I want to generate a random number anywhere in the range of, let's say, because these are the colors I'm going to work with. I'm going to give red a 0 as a number of 0, green a number of 1, blue a number of 2, orange a number of 3, and yellow a number of 4. I want to generate a random number, right? In the range of 0 to 4, right? So let's do that. I'm going to use a random in the generate computer color method. In this method, using the random object that the user typed or the user gave me, I'm going to use it to generate a random integer. So random.nextInt, meaning I'm generating a random integer, okay, in the range of 0 to 4. I'm going to type in 5. It means 0 to 4. So when I type in 5 here, this is going to give me a random integer in the range of 0 to 4. This 5 here is not included. It's the upper limits that is not included. It's like the max, but it's not included. So if I type in something like 10, this is going to generate a list, or give me a random number in the range of 0 to 9. Okay, 10 is not included. 10 is like the upper limit, not included. So I can just type in 5 here, and it's going to give me a random integer in the range of 0 to 4. And that's exactly what I need. Give me a random number, any random number in the range of 0 to 4. It starts from 0 all the way to 1 less than the upper limit you type here. And the upper limit is not included. So it's going to generate a random number. Now once it generates a random number, it's going to return it. I need a place to store it, right? So up here, I'm going to go ahead and define a variable or declare a variable. I'm going to call it, let's say, this number is basically what's going to represent what I'm going to use to choose a word here. I'm going to specify 0 or attach 0 to red, 1 to green, 2 to blue, 3 to orange, and 4 to yellow. So this number is just what's going to represent the words, each word. So I'm going to call it, I'm going to call it, let's say, word number. Okay, word number. Makes sense because that's just the number that represents each of these words. Or I'm going to say color number because that's I'll even say color index because these numbers are actually the indices of these words, because red has an index of 0, green has an index of 1. So I'll call it even color index. That's the index of each of these colors. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create an integer variable, and I'll call it integer because, you know, all these indices are numbers, integers. So int, I'm going to call it color index. Okay, I'm going to initialize it. I'm going to declare it, and over here, whatever number is generated in the range of 0 to 4 is going to be stored in color index here. Then I'm going to check what that number is, what that color index is. So I'm going to go ahead and say if, I'm going to go ahead and create the structure. I want to check to see what that number is so I can know what word the computer generated, right? So I'm going to say if color index, okay, is equal to, now I'm using double equals to compare. If I used, I'm saying if it's equal to 1, I'm using double equals to compare. If I use 1 equal, all I'm saying is, what I'm doing is I'm assigning 1 to color index. What I'm asking here is, if you are able to assign 1 to color index, do what's in the loop. It will be able to assign 1 to color index, so it will always do what's in the loop. What I'm asking here is, I'm saying if color index is exactly the same as 1, it's equivalent to 1. If what's on the right is equal to what's on the left, then do what's in the loop. Now this is what I want. If color index is equal to 1, then I want to say that the computer selected red, right? So I'm generating a random number, and based on what the random number is, I want to say that, hey, I want to match each of the numbers to each of these colors. If that number is 1, then red was selected. If that number is 2, then blue was selected, because this is going to be 0, 1, 2. Okay, 0, 1, 2. If the number was, oh, sorry, I did a mistake. I made a mistake because 1 is actually not red, 1 is green. I'm going to assign 0 to red, 1 to green, 2 to blue, 3 to orange, and 4 to yellow. So if the color index is 1, then it's green, actually, not red, I'm sorry. Let's start with 0, because red is going to have an index of 0. So if color index is equal to 0, because over here we are creating a random number in the range of 0 to 4. So that number can be a 0. And if it's a 0, then we want red. If it's 1, we want green, not red. Okay. So if the color index is equal to 0, then we are going to say that the computer selected red. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable here. I'm going to call it computer word, okay, or computer chosen word, or computer chosen color. Makes sense. It's going to be a string, right? It's going to be a string. So string computer chosen color. I've declared the variable, and over here I'm going to assign computer chosen color. It's not chosen with n. Computer chosen color. Now, if color index is equal to 1, computer chosen color is going to be equal to the color red. If color index is equal to 0, so I've declared a variable computer chosen color over here, but I'm assigning it a color depending or based on the color index. If the color index is equal to 0, then the computer chosen color is equal to red. Okay. Else if the color index over here is equal to 1, okay, then the computer chosen color is equal to green. He said these are how I'm mapping my numbers to the colors. If the number that was generated is, let's say, 2, then the color selected was blue, because this is how I've mapped my numbers. I'm saying 0 for red, 1 for green, 2 for blue, 3 for orange, and 4 for yellow. That's even what the program said. It said, for example, if the number is 0, the selected word is red. If the number is 1, the selected word is green, and so forth. So that's how even the program, says we should do it. All right, so I'm just going to copy this else if statement and then repeat it. So I'll paste it. Oops, I was supposed to copy the whole thing. And repeat it on, and I'll change the value soon. So I'll say if the color is green, if the color index is 1, then color is green. If the color index is 2, then the color is blue. If it's 3, then it's orange. And if it's 4, then the color is yellow. And then by the time it's done here, I would know the computer. Over here I typed it wrong way. It's computer. Oops. So move this to computer. Oops. All right. Okay, so by the time I'm done with this if statement, if else if block, I will have the computer chosen color. So I can go ahead and return it. I can go ahead and return the computer chosen color here. Return computer chosen color. Okay. So it's going to generate a random number. Check to see what that random number is, and based on that color index, which is that random number, assign one color to computer chosen color, and that's how we're going to generate the computer chosen color. So when we call this method, we pass in an appropriate random object. It's going to use that random object to generate a random color. Assign a word to the computer chosen color variable, and then return that computer chosen color as the color that the computer chose. We can test it here and say, we can test it in main and say system.out.println. I'm going to go ahead and call the method generate computer color. Now we know generate computer color needs an argument here. It needs an argument here, which is a random object. So I would have to go ahead and define a random object, right? we have to go ahead and define a random object. In order to use a random class, okay, in order to use a random object and create a random object out of it, you have to go ahead and import the random class so this program can have access to it. So you have to import it. Okay, import the random class so that this program can have access to it. So to import it, I'm going to go ahead and type in import java.util.random. And once I've imported the random class, now this program has access to it. So I can go ahead and declare a random object in main before I go ahead and pass that random object to the generate computer color method, because that method needs a random object for it to function. So over here, I'm going to go ahead and create a random object here. I'll call it random. I'm creating a new random object in memory over here. So now I've created a random object called random. So I can go ahead and pass in that random object that I just created here into this method, because this method needs a random object to work with. So now I've passed in a random object, so it should go ahead and run. Generate computer color now returns a computer chosen color. It returns a string. So I'm going to print out whatever string that's returned. So this system that out the println statement is going to print out whatever string is being returned from the generate computer color method. So let's compile this, and I would have to save it. I'll create a new folder and I'll call this ESP Game. And just do ESP Game, and then I'll save this as esp.java. Yes, we have a couple of errors. Let's see. Okay, so first of all, what I see is it's highlighting this, but I think it's giving me something else. The name of the name of the class has to match the name of the file name, and that's why it's giving me a problem. because I named the class ESP space game and I named the file ESP, it's giving me a problem. So the name of the file always has to match the name of the class. So I'm going to call it the same as the file because I've already saved it. And then I'll compile this and it should work. Okay, so now we have another error. I forgot to terminate this line. So I'm going to terminate it here and compile it. And I have another error. Let's see. It says computer chosen color might not have been initialized. Okay, so initially it didn't know what the computer chosen color is. It wanted to know the value of it initially, so that it wanted to know initially. So I'm going to initialize it to nothing at first. Now this is a space. This is nothing. So I've initialized it to nothing. There's a string that contains nothing. So I'm going to compile this, and then now it works. When I run this program, it should basically call this generate computer color method, pass in a random object, and then return a string, return the computer chosen color as a string, and display it, because I've called it in the system.out.println function. So when I run this, we can see orange popped up. When I run this again, we can see that another color is going to pop up, which is red. Run this again, another color is going to pop up, which is red. Another one is green. So we can see that it's working. The computer is choosing a color which is yellow. The next one is yellow, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now we've done that. Let's see what instructions say. So to select the word, all right, over here. So now we've selected the word. It says next, the program should ask the user to enter the color that the computer has selected. Okay, so we can create a method with this too. We can create a method called, let's say, get user color, right? And that method is going to ask the user to enter a name, and then it's going to return that name. So let's create a public static method here, right? It's also going to return a string. And that public static method is going to return a string, right? Because the user, it's going to take whatever it is that the user typed as a string and return that string. So I'm going to define the return type to be a string here, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this method get user color. Well, I need to also put in the parentheses here just in case it needs. Actually, it needs some parameters. It will need some parameters. First of all, I'm going to use a scanner class or our scanner object to ask for user information, or to ask for user input, right? So this method is also on its own. It's a standalone. It will need a scanner object in order to be able to use it to accept user information, right? So just like I defined the parameter over here as it needing a random object, over here I'm going to define it as it needing a parameter which is a scanner object. So it's going to need a scanner object of type scanner. I'm going to call that object. I'm just going to call this variable scanner. Okay, scanner is just going to be the name. It's going to be a placeholder. It's going to hold that scanner object that the user is going to type in. It has to be of type scanner. This is a class type, and this is a class type variable or an object. Okay, so it's going to need a scanner so that they can use that scanner object to ask for user information. So over here now I'm going to display a message and say, well, before that, in the computer generated color, let's see, before it returns it, I just want to go, once it's done generating the color, before it returns it, I'm just going to say, I'm going to print out the message and say system.out.println. Then I'm going to say computer has chosen a color. Okay, because it's returned and not being printed. I mean, I'm printing it in main, but let me just remove this. I'll leave it here for now. I'm printing it in main, but when you call the method on its own, it's just going to return the color. It's not printing it. But now I want to print out this string. In the method, I'm going to print out computer has chosen a color. That's all. In the get user color, I'm going to first of all print out a message saying user, please enter please guess user. I don't know. Please guess. I'm gonna just use guess because that that's going to make it like a game. We make it a game pretty much. So user, guess the computer's color. You can guess the computer's color. I don't know, computer's color. Okay, so now this is just going to be displayed to the user, and I'm going to allow the user to type in something, right? So I'm going to use a scanner object that the person who called this method pass into this method as an argument. I'm going to use that object, the scanner object here, to allow the user to type in the color. So scanner, I'm going to call the scanner.nextLine method, and the next line method is going to basically pop up a text box and allow the user to type in something, and whatever the user types is going to be returned as a string, right? When it's being returned as a string, I need a place to store it. So I'm going to go ahead up here before this message and define a string. I'm going to call the string closest. I'm going to call the string user color. It's just going to be a string called user color that's going to hold the color that the user typed. So when the user types in the color over here in the text box that's popped up when the next line method is called, okay, it's going to return whatever the user typed, and I'm going to store it in user color here, like this. I'm going to store it in user color here, and once I have the user color, I want to go ahead and return user color, just in case I want to do anything with it. And I want to first, once it's generated a user color, I want it to go ahead and return the user color. So now I have a method that's going to ask the user, when I call it, give it an appropriate scanner object. It's going to basically allow the user to type in a color, and then it's going to return that color. Okay, so now let's go to the questions and see what it's saying. The question. So the after over here, it says, next the program should ask the user to enter the color that the computer has selected over here. So it says over here, after the user has entered his or her color, the program should display the name of the randomly selected color, right? So let's start putting it together in main. First, we want to go ahead and generate the computer color. We don't want to display it yet because the computer didn't want us to display it. So we're going to generate a computer color over here. And in main, I'm going to create a variable that's going to hold that color that the computer has selected. So in main, I'm going to create a string, and I'm going to call it computer color. It's just going to hold the color that the computer has selected over here. So computer color here is going to hold the color that's returned from this method generate computer color. When I call in generate computer color and I pass in that property random object, it's going to return a color, and I'm going to store that in computer color, which is a string. The program didn't say we should print it yet. It just said generate that color, let the computer select the color, and it said next the program should ask the user to enter the color that the computer has selected, right? So I'm going to create another string. Well, first of all, when I call this method, we've already defined the method generate get user color. When I call get user color is going to need over here, it's going to need a scanner object. So in order for us to use a scanner class, we have to go ahead and import it just like the random object, or just like the random class. So to import the scanner class, we have to also type in import java.util.scanner like this. And once we type in import java.util.scanner, in main, we also need to create a scanner object so we can pass it into this get user color method. As you can see, get user color over here, we define it to accept a scanner object. So I'm going to go ahead and create a scanner object. I'm going to call it scanner, which is going to be called to I'm creating a new scanner object in memory. I'm passing in the scanner, I'm passing in over here the system.in method, and I'm going to connect it to the scanner object here, and it's going to accept byte info from the keyboard. Okay, and then we can use the methods in the scanner class to convert whatever the user has typed to whatever we need it to be in, right? So now I have a scanner object. The get user method needs a scanner object, and I have it here. So I can go ahead and pass in the scanner object to the get user color method here. And then get user color, remember, allows the user to type in a color and it returns that color. And once it returns that color, I need a place to store it. So I'm going to go ahead in main and create another string, and I'm going to call it user color. And user color is going to hold the color that's returned from the get user color method call, right? So I'm going to call it here. I'm going to call get user color, but I'm going to store whatever is being returned into user color here like this. So basically this is generating the computer color and storing it in computer color, and then getting the user color and then storing it in user color. Now let's follow what the question says. After the user has entered his or her guess, which is going to be stored here, the program should display the name of the randomly selected color, meaning the name of the color that the computer selected, right? So remember, after the computer selects a color, it says computer has chosen the color before it returns the computer chosen color. So it's going to display computer has chosen the color. It's going to return that computer chosen color. That computer chosen color is going to be stored in computer color. So let's go ahead and display it and say we're going to call the system.out.println. I'm going to say that because over here it said after the user has entered his or her guess, the program should display the name of the randomly selected color, meaning the color that the computer selected. So system.out.print the computer selected I'll have the computer selected color here, computer color here in computer color. So I can concatenate it to this string and say the computer selected computer color like this. And then I can also say the user selected user color, even though the program didn't say that, but we can display that so we can also see, because now we are free to display what the computer selected. So we can do that. So the computer selected computer color, I'm going to concatenate it with another string. I'm going to create a new line character \n. Now when the computer sees the \n together, it creates a new line character, meaning it takes the position from where it's at so meaning the position, you can think of it as a cursor. It's going to take the position from where it's at the moment to the next line, and anything that comes after this new line character is displayed on that next line. So I'm going to create a new line. When it sees this \n together, it's a new line character. They have to be together to create a new line character. So the computer selected computer color, and I'm going to say the user or basically I'm going to say you, meaning the user, you selected. Since I have the user color stored in user color here, I can use it in this string and say I'm going to concatenate it to this string and say you selected user color like this. So we can test it and see. I'm going to compile this and then run it, and then now it's saying, let's see, now it's saying computer has chosen a color. Okay, the computer has chosen a color. User guess the computer's color. I'm going to type in red, and now it says the computer selected green, you selected red. Okay, so we can see that. You can see that both of them we are both selecting colors. The computer selected green, the user selected red. Okay, so let's see. Okay, that's fine. Let's try again. I'm going to type in yellow. The computer selected blue, you selected yellow. So basically we are both selecting colors. Let's try this again. Blue. Oh, so I matched it, but you can see that, you know, I selected the computer's color over here, but we can see the cases. One is uppercase, one is lowercase. It doesn't matter. We'll fix that. We can fix that when we're comparing it. It doesn't really matter. But the truth is we both selected blue. So that's good. All right. So now we are doing well according to the question.